So I'd like to introduce you to one of my two best friends in the world. His name is Dean Jackson. We've been friends for over 10 years now. We've worked together on a number of projects. And the thing that makes Dean special and also somewhat annoying to me is that he's what I call the marketing sharpshooter. He's the marketing rifleman. He's the best I've ever seen personally in my life at looking at a business situation, analyzing it, and then coming up with what the best marketing strategy, marketing piece, copy, what the whole thing, the whole formula to do, and then implementing it and have it work the very first time. And I asked him to come and share some of his wisdom here in the Print Persuasion Masterclass. And I just want to welcome you, Dean.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much for participating and helping out here. So you've created, you've done something that I think is a great idea. You've created a list of some of the lessons that you've learned, the places that you've learned them, and how you've applied them. And maybe you could start going through some of these, and we could have a little discussion about them.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this came from a discussion that I was having with a friend who was become very interested in marketing and copy and was asking me, because he's seen me studying this right from the beginning now, 15 or 18 years or whatever it's been. And he was asking me, if you were just to recommend 10 books, like what would be the 10 books that I could read that would help me get the understanding of marketing that you have? And I started going down, started making some of the books, and we've all read the books. We've all read My Life in Advertising and Scientific Advertising. We've all read Breakthrough Advertising and the Robert Collier Letter Book and Cash Copy and all these books. And I started going down the list, but as I'm writing them down, I'm thinking, you know what? This one only makes sense if you understand and know what I learned from this book. And I got about 5 books down, and I said to him, dude, you can't catch up. There's no way to catch up. There's no way to shortcut this without having the application of it. You know, there's so much knowledge that's out there and so much that we can read and learn, but once you start applying these things, then you really start to see the deeper understanding, and that understanding becomes wisdom then, once you've been able to apply it. So when you asked me to do this, what I decided I would do, I started thinking about what I would consider the top 10 lessons that I've learned in studying and applying marketing all of this time, and how I applied them. So I wrote out 10 of these, and maybe what we'll do is we'll go through, I'll share what the lesson is, I'll share where I got it, and then I'll share how I applied it. Because that's where there's going to be real value, I think, in seeing the different ways to apply, or seeing a real illustrative story on how to apply something.
Well, you are one of the ultimate masters of persuading in print, so tell us some lessons of persuasion.
Perfect. I love it. Okay, so here's lesson number 1 is, what I've learned is knowing how to persuade in print is the ultimate leverage. And that really has been the ultimate lesson in all of this. And when I say persuading in print, I didn't catch all of your first call, Evan, but my definition of persuading in print is using a medium to persuade somebody asynchronously. And by asynchronously, I mean persuading somebody without having to be face-to-face with them. Even though the same lessons would apply, and you could use the principles that you're going to learn to persuade in print in person, and often the best ones persuading in print are learned from applying them in person. What I'm talking about is doing it asynchronously. That's where the real leverage is. And, you know, as I start to think about it in persuasion and marketing, there's some debate in business in general on the value of an idea compared to the execution of an idea. You know, if you're looking at an operations person and a marketing person or a strategy person, and they're having a debate with internally or philosophically about the value of idea versus execution, there may be some gray area in a big business standpoint from the total business of executing an idea versus having the idea. But in persuasion, in marketing, in direct response marketing, where you're measuring the results that you're getting, the idea is everything. The idea can be 10 or 100 times more valuable than the execution of that idea, in marketing especially. So, because when you look at it in marketing, flawless execution from a marketing standpoint, a persuasion standpoint, means that the letters got printed with no typos and no smudges, and they were delivered on time, or that the emails got sent, or that the landing page and the sales letter and the order page are all working and up on your website, and that would be a flawless execution of an idea. But the dynamite that really can blow it all up, that can make it just go into orbit, is the words, or the idea behind the words, the offer that you're making to somebody. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when I talk about this in an asynchronous way, what the big lesson that I learned was coming from a real estate background. I started out as a realtor here in Toronto, and looking back, reflecting on it, it really was the ultimate laboratory for my early years of study in marketing, because I was able to devour all of these marketing ideas and all this marketing information, and then be able to test it and apply it to my real estate business. So the value of the asynchronous part of this was that I came from a background of cold calling, of making 100 cold calls a day, prospecting, and realizing, boy, that is the ultimate hamster wheel experience, where I was, you're making those cold calls, you're making them, you're talking to people. Even if you've got a good approach, you still have to do it synchronously. You still have to make those calls in order for that marketing to work, or that approach to work. And when I first discovered this concept of direct response advertising, where I could put something on a postcard, or I could put something on paper and have people call me, that was really the turning point for me in my life, because it was the point where I realized, man, I am never going to have to work very hard again. And it was just like a big celebration for me, and I'll talk about some of the experiences that I had as I went through there, but I just wanted to kind of set the stage with that one to kind of let people know what the value of really applying and studying print persuasion can be.
Yeah, I'm going to speak just for a sec to that, and talk to the idea that you say that the highest leverage really comes in the the thinking and the ideation. And for I don't know how many years now, back since we met, doing this same kind of stuff together over 10 years ago, we've always argued about the difference between the value of ideas and execution. And what I say now is, for most people, execution is all that matters, unless you know how to come up with the ideas. Because if you know how to come up with the ideas the way that you do, then all of a sudden you're getting 10 or 100 times the leverage, because you're coming up with an idea that, once you execute it, actually increases things by 10x. And I know from experience that you took that realization of, I'm never going to have to work very hard ever again, and you put that into execution. And I and many other successful marketers and business people admire you for it.
That's funny, but that's true. It's been, it really is the ability. I mean, we've got all kinds of different business owners on here. A lot of them are in different situations. Some of them really maybe want to be involved constantly in working in their business and being involved in the day-to-day. But then there are probably another set of people, more like me, who would rather be golfing or watching movies or having fun,
Yeah, for sure.
And that's really what this ultimately allows the leverage to do. So,
Well, and if you can help 100 times as many people with 1/10 the work and then take the rest of the time and relax with it, I mean, isn't that what we're all trying to do?
perfect. Sign me up.
You actually created the club, so
That's
you're going to have to sign
I'm not
everybody
only a
else up.
member. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
All right. So let's go on to lesson number 2 then. And lesson number 2 is no one cares about you or your product or service like you care about you and your product and your service. And I bet you know exactly where that lesson came from. It came from our friend Jeffrey Lant and his book Cash Copy. And this is funny because Eben and I sometimes like to read to each other from some of these great books just to quote for fun. I'm going to read something from Jeffrey Lant. In his book Cash Copy, he starts out the book with the 21 egregious copy errors. And I'm just going to excerpt one from egregious error number 2. He said, your prospects are not interested in your products or services. They're interested only in themselves, in their all too often petty aspirations, flawed desires, crack-brained anxieties, and foolish fears. Thus it is to these, not the manifest wonders of your product or service, that you must appeal. No one will ever be as interested in what you are selling as you are, particularly if you are the inventor of said wonder. Expect no one to be as interested as you are. Take pleasure from the fact that you are the genius who has conceived such a marvel, but take your pleasure quietly, individually, or gather clandestinely with other such wonder workers to beat the collective drums of hubris for your unrivaled, unbelievable, astonishing, and surpassing marvelous creation. Then get back to the real business of business, focusing on the wants, needs, and aspirations of the severely flawed people who are the only people who can provide you with the lifestyle you desire, your prospects. And I always get a kick out of that when I read it, because so often it's ingrained in us that whenever we're talking about our business or our product or our expertise, if we're a professional, we want people to know that we are an expert, or we want people to know that our product has these attributes or that it's wonderful and that it will help them. But the reality is nobody cares about that. And I did hear you talk about really taking the time to understand and get inside your prospect's mind before you start crafting your print persuasion messages. And, that really is the most powerful thing you can do, because the only thing that people care about is themselves. Eben, when you and I used to speak at main events, we'd always have people coming up to us showing us their very expensive, very elaborately produced personal brochures, which was a big piece of real estate marketing. And I would equate that personal brochure, it's the same thing in other businesses as a product brochure or spec sheets or any of the type of promotional pieces that we put out. And, a little thing that we always used to do with people is we'd almost change the subject, give them a pen and say, hey, I just got this new pen, try this out, and give them a piece of paper, and they'd start to write. And the first thing that people will write is their name, because it's the first thing that people are thinking about. And we would, of course, then be able to make that transition that, the reason you wrote your name is because it's all you think about. All you think about is yourself. And it's exactly the same thing with your prospects. If you can imagine, if they've got a choice of picking up a personal brochure that's all about you, or a brochure that has that report title that you were talking about in the last session with the real estate gentleman, of saying here why the California market has turned around and why it's going to go down even more before it gets better. That, to somebody who's in a situation where they bought their house at one price and it's gone down, is going to be far more interesting than a brochure about Dean Jackson as a realtor or anybody's name as a realtor, anytime that you can make your print persuasion about what their needs are, about what they're looking for, that's really where you're going to get the most results. Now, when I started doing this, my evolution in real estate really went from starting out as cold calling to making some money and then thinking, I'm going to start being smart. I'm going to start getting my name out there. And that's a pretty peculiar thing within real estate. And it's the same in any business. You've heard people say, you got to get your name out there. And I always joke about that because it's not very specific. It's your name out there. And what I'm much more inclined to want to do is to focus on getting your prospect's name in here. And that's really the difference with using direct response, with using print persuasion to really let your prospects know that you know what their situation is and you understand their situation as good or better than they do, and that you, by implication, have the answer for that and offering them something that they can respond for. So I started out, I would do personal brochures and I would mail out personal postcards that were talking about me and my accomplishments and why I'm great. And then I had this understanding of focusing on them and their needs. And the evolution of that was that I developed a concept that to this day still works and there are hundreds of real estate agents all across the country that still use this system, but I created something called the Guide to Halton Hills. And it went through the mindset of understanding, where are my prospects right now? What are they concerned about? What are they thinking about? Now, I lived in an area called Georgetown, Halton Hills, right outside of Toronto, and we had a lot of people moving from Toronto, from other areas into Georgetown. And the first thing that those people are concerned with is what kinds of houses are available in Georgetown and what are the prices. So I got the idea from a new home subdivision that was being built, where you go into the new home subdivision and you realize they've got all the models up here, they've got pictures and floor plans, they've got the price lists, all these things, so you get a sense of what's available. And then I realized, wow, you know what? 20 years ago, all these houses over here were new homes. I bet there are floor plans and stuff available for those. And so I went around, I took pictures of the different types of homes that are available in Halton Hills, put it all together in a guide that showed, 60 different styles of homes, the price ranges, and a map and community information and all that kind of stuff, and started offering in ads, instead of talking about me and having my picture and my slogan in it, just offering with a picture of the guide your free 2007 guide to Halton Hills real estate prices. And people would respond to that, and they would engage. I would be able to engage them in a dialogue and follow up with them and build a relationship and be able to help them find homes. And that really was, the end of ever having to make these cold calls, because now I realized, you know what? It's so much more exciting to let people call you. That really is the ultimate leverage. That was immediately taking 2 or 3 hours away from every day, because now I didn't have to spend 2 or 3 hours making those 100 calls. I could spend $200 or $300 to run an ad in the Homes magazine, and that would bring me 30 or 40 or 50 people a month who would request the guide. And so it was really pretty powerful, just taking away my need to put myself in the ads and focus on my prospects.
Yeah, it's amazing nowadays too, where you can do things like this so inexpensively, and especially on the internet. I mean, you can write a book in Microsoft Word and publish it as a downloadable file and give it away, and give away something that has 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or $100 or more worth of value that's just a giant package of print persuasion. And it can be full of education, it can be full of comparisons, it can be full of reviews, it can be how to solve your problem. It can be techniques. It can be whatever you want. And you can just distribute this thing to as many people as will download it. I mean, you and I both know people that have had hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people download their, downloadable free offerings online.
Yes, exactly.
And then they can follow up, just write some more print persuasion. It all works, like you said, asynchronously.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a bigger danger about making your advertising or your marketing focus on you. And a few years ago, I write a newsletter every month for the real estate industry, and one of the articles that I wrote, I was flying from Florida to a main event, and I was reading in the Forbes magazine that had the top earning entertainers. And in the magazine, I was surprised to see Siegfried and Roy in that magazine. And they had just signed a new contract with the Mirage. I think it was $28 million. They worked 40 weeks, and they were going to finish out their career with the Mirage for their $28 million. And then a little bit further up in that list was the Blue Man Group. And, the guys who've been on those Intel commercials and the Super Bowl and the Grammys and all that, they were on the list with $69 million. And I read the article about them, and I found it to be very interesting that there are actually more than 30 blue men, that they've duplicated themselves here, that they've been able to create a show that is three guys that are wearing blue face paint that doesn't depend on them. And that's where, when you look at what happened with Roy when he was mauled by the tiger, immediately that business had to shut down. 100 and something people directly employed by the show lost their jobs. Probably even more from the casino lost their jobs. It just illustrates the difference between building your business around yourself or building it around a system that you can duplicate.
It's a great one.
Let's go on to number 3. Number 3 is to stop trying to be clever and creative and focus on being simple, clear, and direct. And that's another sort of offshoot from Jeffrey Lant from Cash Copy. That's something from Claude Hopkins in Scientific Advertising and My Life in Advertising. And the lesson there really is to not try and go to all these elaborate lengths to make your advertising clever or creative or award-winning or cutting edge or any of those things, but to focus on what is the simplest, clearest, most direct way that I can communicate what I want to communicate. And Eben, you'll love this example because it's one that you and I worked on together. Do you remember our friend Jack Litz? And we were up in San Francisco.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and he was representing a new home builder who was selling these loft shells where they were empty shells of lofts. It was a new development, and they had 24 lofts that they were shells that they were selling, and they were spending thousands of dollars on quarter-page and half-page ads in the San Francisco Chronicle. And he showed us one of the ads that they were running, and literally, here's what the ad was. Do you remember it, Eben?
Yeah.
With the turtle. So they had a overhead view of a turtle. So you're looking at the back of the turtle's shell, and the turtle is, kind of sticking out, and there was an arrow pointing to the turtle saying, "This is you." And then there was another arrow pointing to the turtle's shell saying, "This is your new home at whatever the name of the lofts were." And that was it. With just at the bottom, in very small print, the name of the project and the developer's information. And that was the entire ad. Now, what Jack was asking Eben and I was, well, what can I do to sell these 24 lofts? And, the thing that we always think about is not to think that you're selling 24 lofts, because you're not selling 24. You're looking for one person who wants to buy one loft. So the very best approach is to think about what would it take to attract that one person to buy one of these lofts. So when we looked at it, we came up with a little classified ad, and the ad read Soma. That was that's what they call South of Market in San Francisco. Really cool loft, south of Market. You finish inside. Call my voicemail for details. And we had the phone number. And then the message that we had him leave, just like it was just a guy leaving information about this loft. So it was almost like you called his voicemail. Hi, this is Jack. If you're calling about the loft, I'm going to be over there on Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock if you want to stop by. The address is, and gave them the address and a little bit of direction on where it was. And so he ran that little classified, which cost maybe $100 instead of $12,000, and had something like 28 people come by that open house that Sunday. And then do you remember what they did with that, Eben?
No, I don't remember, actually.
They never ran it again.
Oh, with the ad, right? Of course,
Oh,
I
you
remember that. Yeah,
part.
I remember
Yeah.
that. But that's always the story, so that doesn't sound unusual to me.
Oh, exactly. But, the thing was, they never ran it again because the developer, his friend's son, was some creative director at an ad agency, and they were giving them, they already committed to them, the advertising business. And they were concerned about the ego, about themselves, they wanted to run really cool cutting edge ads, in spite of the fact that it was costing them thousands of dollars, ultimately hundreds of thousands of dollars over the period of time that they were running all those ads.
Spectacular. I remember that story. That's a great one.
Yeah, so that was a very impactful lesson to me, and I've used that lots of different times, just that mindset of thinking not about being clever, but just about doing the most direct, clearest thing. Another example, I was working with a client who does big seminars, and they were running emails with all this long copy about the seminars, and wondering about what can we do to improve the click-through rate. So I came up with a very short email that essentially said, hey, Eben, can you make it to this? With a link, and send them to the page that we were trying to get them to go to. And it was just fascinating how many more people went with just the clear, direct way of asking them to do something.
Yeah, and it didn't it outperform the others by like 5 times or something?
Yes, it did. It
just
did.
crushed the competition.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Just being direct, Okay, number 4. So lesson number 4 is tell the truth. And this is one of my favorites. There's a gentleman named Jerry Spence. He's a big, high-profile defense attorney. You've probably heard the name. You probably know who he is. He's written a book called How to Argue and Win Every Time. And one of the most impactful things about that book to me was this concept of telling the truth, and how the truth is really the exciting thing. It's the thing that really has the freedom to set us free. And you have to imagine that people receiving your communication, this is the way he describes it, are surrounded with these invisible psychic tentacles that are surrounding the communicator, and they're kind of feeling around, and they're testing for congruity and authenticity and truth. And these psychic tentacles, as Jerry says, can detect the thin clank of the counterfeit. And I thought, man, that's very powerful, because you can imagine that our tendency is to sort of veil the truth with copy techniques, or we want to protect our weaknesses, or we talk about holding our cards very close to our chest. Everything is very sort of secretive. We don't want people to know the truth. And so we often try and come up with these elaborate ways to go around the truth, or to tell a story, or to shape a story that makes us ultimately look good. And we hold our truth as a weakness that we have to hide from the person that we're trying to persuade. But what Jerry always says is that the psychic tentacles know. You can't hide from the psychic tentacles. They know, they can detect that thin clank of the counterfeit, and the answer is to tell the truth in a compelling way. So if we tell the truth about a situation, it's far more powerful than if we just try and kind of roundabout protect our ego or protect our story. Now, I'll give you an example of how I applied this, because I was very excited to test it out after I'd read the book. And, Jerry wasn't talking about it in terms of advertising per se or marketing, but he's talking about it in terms of communicating. And I had a client who was a real estate developer just outside of Toronto here, and he had been developing this property north of the city in an area called Muskoka, which is a very popular vacation destination. People have cottages, lake homes up there where they go up for the weekends. And it's kind of widely known, if you've got a project up there and you're not sold out by Labor Day, you're going to be holding on to these for the rest of the winter, because it kind of boards up after Labor Day and there's not as much activity. Well, I had lunch with him the day after Labor Day, and he was telling me about this situation with these building lots that he had. He had 6 lots left to go. And I suggested to him that we write an ad and tell the story. Because he was telling me over lunch why he was really hoping to sell these 6 lots was that he had another property that he had an opportunity to make a balloon payment on, but to do it, he had to do it by November 1st, and it would really help him if he could sell these lots and make that balloon payment. So I said, well, leave it with me. Let me write a little ad here. I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get these lots appraised, because he was saying in ads with big logos and starbursts and everything, big blowout sale, 30% off, all these things, which is sales puffery in a way. And I had him get the lots appraised so we had a real current market value on these. Because I'm saying 30% off of what? 30% off doesn't mean anything unless we've got the real dollars that we're taking it off of. So he went ahead and had them appraised. I wrote an ad, took a picture of the view from one of these lots, and the ad said, I need to sell these 6 Muskoka home sites in the next 30 days, and I'm willing to sell them for 30% below their current, and we put in brackets, September 96, appraised value. And we went on to tell the story in the ad, just like he had told it to me over lunch. That, my name's Don Naylor. I've been developing property in Muskoka for 30 years. I've got the last 6 lots in this development here, and I've got this opportunity that I can make a balloon payment on another property, so I really need to sell these lots, but I need to get them sold in the next 30 days. And we went on and described, we've had each of the lots appraised, and we're selling them for 30% below their current appraised value. Lot number 1 is this, lot number 2, and went on and described them and said, call this number and we'll send you an information package. And he, when I went up to his office, 2 weeks later, I went up there and he literally had burned out their photocopy machine, making up these packages to send to people that were responding for the ad. The phone was literally ringing off the hook. And he ended up selling all 6 of those lots, being able to make that balloon payment, and all from telling the truth. It was very, very powerful.
Yeah, you were talking earlier about that, the protecting of the ego kind of thing. And what we're seeing more and more now in marketing is that the more authentic you are, the more real you're being with other people, the more they feel like they can reach out and connect with you as another person, like, or as a
Right.
business. And when you tell the truth, you show a little chink in the armor. You show a little bit about, who you really are and what's really going on. It allows someone to relax and say, oh, I'm dealing with a real person here.
Yeah, and that was, the I didn't tell you this, but the one of the subheads, the first subhead in the ad started out, "Here's my dilemma." And that was where, when you're being truthful and you're telling somebody that you've got a dilemma, you're being honest and laying all your cards out for them. That is, the most honest thing that you can do. And by the way, this has worked in lots of different situations. I've sold lots of different homes with this. I had a couple who had a townhouse, and they had bought a home in the country. They've been looking and looking. They found the perfect one. They put in an offer, but they had to make it conditional on selling their townhouse. And now they had a 2-week opportunity here, and the ad basically had a picture of their townhouse and said, we need to sell our Kings Mill townhouse in this weekend, and we're willing to sell it for $7,500 below its current value. And we go on and tell the similar story, how we have loved living here, but we found the perfect house in the country for us.
It's incredibly powerful.
Okay, number 5 is, everyone is helpless against the law of reciprocity. And the law of reciprocity, a lot of our listeners are probably familiar with Robert Cialdini and his great book, Influence. And he talks about the 6 weapons of influence, of which reciprocity is one. And Eben and I were fortunate enough to kind of get to know Robert Cialdini. We got to have dinner with he and his wife out in Phoenix, and it was very interesting to meet him. But the law of reciprocity is the one that kind of jumped out at me initially, because we're all familiar with it. The law of reciprocity is what makes polite society work. It's the phenomena that kind of evens the scale among people, where from Dr. Cialdini has said, essentially, if you do me a favor, Eben, then I owe you a favor, is the way that reciprocity works. And, the thing is that if you look at the way this works, and it doesn't even have to be a favor, it's doing something nice for somebody, doing something that you kind of like is going out of your way and benefiting them, something that will benefit them. But using some examples from the book are testing the rate at which people will do a behavior after they've been given a gift of some kind. So a couple of examples from, they have students come in and under the guise of doing some sort of art appreciation study or some kind of a study, and they've got somebody in the class with them. They're doing them in pairs, and one of the people is a Confederate who's together with the experimenters, but is going through it alongside the real subject of the study. And at a break, the Confederate will go and get a Coke, and he'll get another Coke for the guy he's doing the study with. Now, these are people that don't even know each other. So he would go and get the Coke and come back and say, oh, I went out, take a little break. They said I could get a drink, so I got you a Coke too. Here you go. Then they'd go through the rest of the experiment, and at the end of the experiment, the person who got the Coke would say, hey, you know what? I'm selling these raffle tickets for our fraternity. They're, 2 for $5 or whatever it is. And they would measure the number of or frequency of times that the people who were the subjects would buy the raffle tickets, both after they'd been given the gift and in the group that had not been given the gift. And the group that got the Coke, even though they didn't ask for it, bought something like 3 or 4 times more raffle tickets than the group that that didn't get the Coke. And I thought, man, it's fascinating to me, that it works even if you don't invite the burden of that reciprocity, because that's really what our psyche, it's weighing on us until we can even the score. And that's why we go out of our way to avoid being ensnared in this law of reciprocity. We go out of our way so that people don't go out of their way for us. We go into a retail store and somebody says, "Can I help you?" "No, thanks, I'm just looking." All those kind of things. So here's an example of how we can very easily engage this law of reciprocity without waiting for our prospects or our clients to make the first move. That's what we always want people to do, is we want to be available to people, and we think that we're doing the right thing by making ourselves available to people. But I'll use an illustrative example here. If I were to bring you into my living room and I were to say to you, "Eben, I'm really glad you're here. If there's anything that you want, there's lots of food and stuff in the fridge. If you're hungry, go ahead and get something, or go ahead and get a drink. I'll be over here in this other room. If you need anything, just give me a call."
That actually sounds like what you say when I come to your house.
Exactly. Now, and you know me well enough to go into my fridge and get stuff.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
But most people, there's no way that they would go into my fridge, or they're not going to call me and ask for something.
Sure.
But if I brought you and I sat you down in the living room and I went into the kitchen and I know that you like cookies, and I came out with a freshly baked plate of cookies, and I said to you, holding the cookies right in front of you, if I went to you and said, "Eben, would you like a cookie?" it would be very difficult for you not to take the cookie. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
It would be very difficult for you to refuse that, because I've already done the work. Do you know what I mean? I've already prepared the cookies. And it's funny how we don't want to turn people down, just like we don't want to burden them with something. Like, you would never say to me, "You know what? Would you bake me some cookies?"
Well, probably not.
But yet so often we expect our prospects to equivalent ask us to bake them some cookies. Would you take me out to look at some homes? But if we were to say and offer them, "Hey, we're having a Saturday tour of homes this Saturday. Would you like to come?" It's very different, very easy for somebody to respond.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I remember a story that Jerry Ballinger used to tell us about how he worked in the, I think in the stock brokerage business, and he used to make cold calls himself. And one day he developed a system where he started sending out these packages of investment information that had all kinds of education and other materials inside. And he would send them out, and then he would call up the people that he sent them to. He would send them to targeted lists, and he'd call them on the phone, and he'd say, "Hi, it's Jerry Ballinger calling from XYZ Investment Company. I just put a package of information in the mail to you, and you should receive it in the next few days, and I'll be interested to hear what you think." "Okay, talk to you later."
Yes.
And it was a call that no one was expecting, because he was calling to tell them he was sending them something for free. And it set up that loop of, "I'm sending you something." And so then when he called back, instead of them saying, "Get lost," he'd call him up and he'd say, "Hey, yeah, it's Jerry Ballinger calling again. Did you get that package of stuff that I sent you? I'm interested to hear what you think." And it created a more open dialogue, because what could they do? Could they, they couldn't say, "Get lost, you jackass. You just sent me something."
Right, exactly.
Yeah, are you going to say to the person with the plate of cookies, "Get away from me"?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
It's not the human thing to do.
Yes.
So, what do you got next there?
Perfect.
Jackson.
So here we go. Number 6 is just get your prospect moving in the right direction and let commitment and consistency do the rest. And, this has been a very powerful lesson, again, from our friend Dr. Robert Cialdini, that one of the weapons of influence that he talks about or discovered, the laws of influence, is that people act consistently with public commitments. So whenever they say something or do something that creates a sort of position where they've kind of drawn a line in the sand, that they then continue to act in accordance with what would be consistent with somebody who does that behavior. So examples that they use from the book are measuring the donations from a control group to a charity or to a cancer research or some sort of a charity like that. And they would then go out and instead of asking people for money, they would just go out and make people aware. Eben, did you know that this is Cancer Awareness Month? Would you be willing to wear this ribbon? And of course, far more people are willing to wear the ribbon. Nobody wants to seem like they're, for cancer. Everybody wants to be against cancer, so they'll wear the ribbon. And then what they would do is 2 weeks later, they would go back to the group that had agreed to wear the ribbon and do their fundraising drive, and those people would give far more money than the group that was not asked to wear the ribbon. And it's just how something as little as taking a simple stance creates a new identity for somebody. They would do things like this on political campaigns. Would you put this sticker on your window, or just a small little thing by your front door? And the people who would comply with that, when they came back, would then agree in far greater numbers to have a sign installed in their front lawn to support this candidate. And so, it's fascinating how if you can get somebody just to take even kind of dip their toe in the water kind of thing to get consistent, just to kind of set a behavior in motion, that they'll be far more willing to behave consistently with that in the future. Now, the example that I have applied using this principle, I'm going to share it with the caveat that it may sound like the most ridiculously complex dialogue method of marketing that you've ever heard, but I'm going to share with you a way that I was able to triple conversions on a $2,500 website offer, going from 3 to 4 a month to 12 to 15 a month with this method here. I think I've shared this with you, Eben, but maybe not. That one of the things that we do just with engaging both reciprocity and commitment and consistency is, instead of promoting the fact or advertising the fact that we had a website for realtors and a website building service, I would offer people a free ebook that was not saying buy a website from me. It's saying, you're a realtor, here's a free ebook that you can download and a subscription to my newsletter, and that was all I would offer on that website. And people would respond at a very high rate because it's all that we were doing on that front page. Now, we would set up our autoresponder messages to send out a quick little email that looks like a reply to the notice that we got that they had subscribed to the newsletter. So we would send out a little email that would essentially say, hey, Eben, welcome to the new information letter. If you haven't already done it, you can download your free ebook at this link right here. And by the way, send me your mailing address. I'd like to send you our welcome package. And you then would reply to that and say, thanks a lot, here's my mailing address. And I would see that you are in Santa Monica. Now, what I would do then, because all of that has happened with an autoresponder, then I would have my assistant Jesse send an email back to the people who responded with their mailing address from an email address that was Dean Jackson, sending back to them, oh, hey, thanks, Evan. Thanks for getting back to me. You know what? I work with Matthew Greenberg in Beverly Hills on his website, and I'm looking for somebody to work with in Santa Monica. Do you have time to work with a couple of extra buyer clients a month? If you do, is there a time when we could get together on the phone to talk about maybe working together? And then you would reply back, or all these people would reply back and say, oh, of course I've got time to work with a couple of new buyer clients. Here's my phone number. Here's my cell phone number. Have Jesse call me here. And I would email back to them, or Jesse would email back to them under my email address. Perfect. I'll have Jesse give you a call. Then Jesse would forward from the Dean Jackson email to Jesse a message that said, and copy you, Eben, on it, that said, Jesse, would you get together with Eben? I'd like to work with him in Santa Monica. And then Jesse, from his email address, would email you and say, hey, Eben, Dean asked me to get together with you. Would tomorrow afternoon work? And so that little, it's not as complex as it sounds to describe it, but that little, commitment and consistency campaign there, I've got now engaged with people on a basis of something that is meaningful to them. They came in, they got a free gift, the free ebook, which we've now engaged that law of reciprocity. We asked them a simple question, do you have time to work with a couple of new buyer clients a month? And they said, well, yes, I do have time to work with a couple of new buyer clients. So now that they've got to continue to act in a way that's consistent with that, because what we're going to show them how to do is not how to get a website. That's incidental to this. It's how to get a couple of extra new buyer clients a month, just like we're helping Matthew Greenberg get in Beverly Hills.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because you've taken this technique of translating into the words, into the language that's meaningful to them, to the benefit that they're looking for, which is what your client's looking for. So you go right to it. You're looking for extra deals. You're looking for extra buyer clients, and you've automated the marketing and sales process with cut and paste words. I mean, you've literally taken these little short, one-on-one personalized emails, and you've automated this dialogue. And you increased your own conversion by, what did you say, 300% or something?
Yes, exactly. Went from 3 to 4 to 12 to 15.
And, like you said, it sounds a little bit complex. We actually started doing something like this ourselves in our company, 5 or 6 years ago, when people would buy our products, where we'd start emailing them right afterwards, personal, and it was a real human doing this, one-to-one messages that were personalized. And it had a fantastic effect. And it sounds a little complex, but you're not doing it.
Yeah.
Right? You got somebody that you're paying to do this,
yes,
who it probably takes them 30 minutes every day to do the whole thing with all the leads.
That's exactly right.
Right. And so,
and that's often the thing. I often ask people, are you, because a lot of times that'll be an argument. That sounds really complex, but something I heard, Dan Kennedy say one time is you're making an argument based on logic or logistics, because you can't argue with the logic of it, and the logistics you can get handled.
Yeah, I mean that probably cost. What did that cost you? An extra $4 a day?
Right. Exactly.
Total.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So
well, and you know what? Truly, I'm just going to connect this back to one of the things that I'm really trying to hammer home here is when you're communicating with a person using some type of print communication means, from their perspective, the more it's personal, one-to-one, a real human talking to them and helping them get what they want, and that's the way they perceive it, the better you're probably going to do in most cases. And that's all you did. You just, you took the process and you personalized it. You made it about a human reaching out and helping another human, talking to them the way a friend would talk to them.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, spoke their language.
Like you're just engaged in a conversation. I love your concept of a business friendship.
Yeah, that's it. And it's funny because, just like if you use speak right, or you write the way that you talk and you write copy that way, if you communicate with another person like a friend right off the bat, if you start talking like you know them and you start saying things like, "Hey, what's going on? How are you doing?" It goes past that protector part of the brain, the formal part, and they go, "Oh, this is someone to be cool with. I can relax. I can just talk to them like another person." And you can do it in a business context. You can do it in a business situation.
It's powerful.
It is.
Okay, number 7. Know what one thing you want your prospects to do 2 to 3 moves ahead. And, when you look at this, it's so often we try and do too much in one thing. We want our ads to do too much, and we don't want to kind of put our self-interest secondary, to kind of realize for the greater good that by focusing only on this one move that we want our prospects to make, this one thing that we want somebody to do, that one thing is going to set in motion the rest of all of it, and everything is going to fall into place. For example, even just using that example that we talked about by selling websites. Now, ultimately, that's the end goal, is engaging in a business relationship with somebody to help them with their website. Now, rather than starting with that, though, is knowing that the bigger idea is that if I can just engage them in a dialogue, I know that if I can get somebody to take that first step, which is to go from unknown to known, giving me their email address and their name, that I know that I can now take the next step, which is if I can get them to tell me where they live, that now I can use the next step, which is to find somebody that I'm already working with that's close to them and advance the relationship that way. So it's very powerful when I first discovered that, getting somebody's email address is the driver of all of this stuff. I started creating websites where it was the only decision that somebody had to make. And I kind of laugh because now, it's so common, known as like name squeeze pages we've heard everywhere, which is something you've been credited as being the father of the name squeeze page, by the way, which I love to hear.
Well, you know what? I think that's rather ironic because, I talk about the story of us sitting in my bedroom, and that sounds a little weird, but us sitting in my bedroom at my computer desk, and us brainstorming this whole thing. Until I read your outline, I was like, I had kind of forgotten that you were actually using something like this before you ever taught this to me.
Right. And that's why I taught it to you, because I realized how well it was working for me. The thing is, though, that knowing that one thing, if that's the thing that's going to set everything in motion, to just exclude all the other noise from that, to focus all your attention on just getting somebody to take that first step, that first baby step, and then knowing that 2 or 3 moves ahead, you know exactly where it's headed.
You and I were talking recently about that concept of, most people couldn't even figure out what they want their customer to do and then just say it explicitly.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that was, that's something that has been, very powerful, is thinking, whenever I'm going to create a new campaign or create a new letter or something, or consult somebody on creating a new package, is, I ask them, if you had the power to command them to do something, to do what it is that you're expecting them to do when they open this envelope, what would that be? Like, if all you could put on this paper is, write your name, and if you could write the instruction that said write your name and your address on a piece of paper and send it along with a check for $39 to this address. If that is ultimately what you really want somebody to do, often they can't even really articulate that that's the thing that they really want. So I always imagine starting out with, I call it the naked truth. If you could send somebody something that just told it, just like it is, exactly what you want them to do, without having to dress it up with copy or whatever, it strips it down and it forces you to think, if I could only get them to do one thing when they come to this website, what would that one thing be? So you start with, leave your name and your email address here. And now what else do I have to add to that to make it a benefit for them to want to leave their name and their email there? But the building block of it is, I want them to leave their name and their email address.
Yeah, it's spectacular in most of the advertisements, most of the websites, most of the marketing that I review, where people are trying to persuade other people using print means. It's not obvious what they want the prospect to do. It's not even obvious to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't figure out what they're trying to get the prospect to do. And I know that if I can't figure it out quickly and easily, that the average prospect is not going to be able to figure it out quickly and easily.
Right.
And that idea of just sitting down and saying, if I had a magic wand and I could, determine what they're going to do, what would I have? What would I tell them to do? That's a good one.
Yeah. Perfect. So number 8 is to narrow your focus to a single target market that you can dominate. And I got this lesson from a book about Procter & Gamble called The P&G 99. And this book outlines Procter & Gamble's secrets to building number one brands. And just recently they had their 23rd brand to join the $1 billion annual sales club. And so they've got 23 brands now that do more than $1 billion a year in business. And it's fascinating to watch a company like that and just to know that they've got these underlying principles that they go by. And so the 3 that really jumped out to me from there are, when they look at these, they're going into a market and they're planning to dominate the market. That's their very first thing, is they're going in with the expectation that they are going to be the dominant brand in that category. And, I found that's really a fascinating thing, because so often people, think about creating new products, or they think about creating new services just to have an entry in that category, sort of thing. And it's very different than going into something where you're planning to dominate it. You can't really say those words, plan to dominate, without having some sort of a physical sensation when you're saying it. It creates a visceral kind of feeling, which sounds very self-serving, that they plan to dominate. But the very next one is that their guiding principle is to build the very best product from the customer's perspective. So they're going to build the very best product that is available for that category from the customer's perspective. So they're not looking to build something in the most economical way. They're not looking to cut corners or to do something that's going to be an advantage to them. They're looking at doing something that's going to be an advantage for the user. And if it ends up that it costs more, they charge more. It's a premium product, but it's the very best product that there is. And then the other one that I got from that was treat each brand as an individual business, which is, it's really the way that I've looked at that and applied that in our own kind of businesses is looking, I like to call it stratification, where you're kind of looking at a market
You're looking at the whole, but realizing that there are lots of different facets of that market. So you're looking at the forest, but instead of seeing the forest, you're starting to see the individual and the different types of trees that make up that forest. And that's why Procter & Gamble can have, for instance, 5 different laundry detergents that all dominate their category, because they're all appealing to a different attribute of the market. Like Tide is for people who want to get their clothes as white as they can be. And Cheer is for people who want to wash their clothes in all the same temperature. And Gain is for people who want to get out tough stains. So it's all these different things. For the realtors, there's very different segments of the market. There's first-time buyers who have very different needs than people who are buying luxury homes or people who are buying investment properties. You start to look at what are the different stratifications in that market, and how can I build a plan to dominate one of those at a time?
Yeah, this goes back to a very important concept, which if you participate in our altitude training program, we're going to go into depth on, and it's a really important mindset. And one of the things that it does when you plan to completely dominate your niche, and I mean your niche could be 10 people. I mean, you can narrow it down to 10 people if that's what your niche is, or 100 or 1,000, or, like P&G, there could be tens of millions or hundreds of millions or whatever their customer base is worldwide. But when you do that, you put a sharp focus on your mind, and you put a sharp focus on the words that you're communicating. You put a sharp focus on the tone that you have. You speak more authoritatively because you're talking about your territory. You're not talking about something in generalities. You're talking in a very specific, very confident way as the leader, as the dominator of that thing. And it has a profound effect, I believe.
Fascinating, huh?
Yeah. It also just strategically conveys all kinds of other benefits as well. When you're the leader, when you're the creator of the category, when you're the one that made the niche, everybody wants to work with you, even if they're companies that are much bigger than you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? A lot of psychological advantage both to customers and to partners.
Okay. Number 9 is give your prospects the gift of imagining life without your product or service. And, this was a very interesting lesson that I learned from Homer McDonald, who I've been fortunate to work with for the last 10 years. We created a wonderful book together. And the book is called Stop Your Divorce. And Homer had shared something with me that his clients often do that was directly applicable to what we go through in trying to persuade somebody of something. What Homer found was that he said often clients will try to get him to defend his position, which is really just an attempt to take attention off of their situation. So it gives them something to pay attention to other than their own situation. And so what he does is turn them right back around and sort of push the accelerator pedal to let them see where their path goes, where it ends up. And one of the examples that he uses in a counseling environment is that, let's say that a couple are arguing and the woman wants the divorce and the husband doesn't, and every day when she comes home they argue about it, and she says, I don't love you, and I've never loved you, and I don't want this marriage to work, I've had it. And the husband is arguing against it, saying, but I love you, and what about the kids, and I'll change, and all these things, which are kind of trying to argue for his way. And so she's kind of, what he's saying, addicted to the arguing. So he encourages him to say to the woman, you know what? I would prefer that the marriage work out, but you're absolutely right. It's impossible, so I will help you find an apartment and move out. And then to shut up. That's what he tells them to do. And in this situation, she got up, walked around the house for about 5 or 10 minutes, came back and said, you know what? I think this marriage can work, and I want it to work. And, the fascinating thing that happened there is that the arguing was taking attention away from what the reality would be if she got her way. So now he's giving up the arguing, giving up trying to argue for his position, giving her the opportunity to imagine what is going to happen now. What would it be like if I did get this divorce? I'm going to have to move out and get an apartment. And how am I going to live on half of my income? And how, all this kind of stuff, all the realities of what getting her way would want. And so we were able to take that same principle and apply it in our sales letter. And I'll just read from the PS of the sales letter, and you can see how that process works. Is, how many of the 44 strategies in Stop Your Divorce will work for you? I don't know. What I can tell you is that over 18,000 people just like you have read Stop Your Divorce since 1998. I get phone calls every day from people praising the book and telling me how their lives have changed. Their spouses are back and loving, and they still can't believe it. But let's say you didn't buy this book. Where will that leave you? Will you get your mate back using your current strategy? Probably not. Will you be kicking yourself for the rest of your life if you didn't try everything possible to save your relationship? Absolutely. I can't make the decision for you. It's 100% up to you. I can help you, but you've got to take the first step. If you get stuck or you need private counseling, I've included my phone number and my contact information in the book so you don't have to go through this alone. See, the interesting thing that's happening there is letting people experience what would happen if you don't buy this book, or if you don't get this insurance policy, or you don't take this consulting. Give people the opportunity to experience what it would be like if they didn't do it.
Well, you're also doing something that I talked about in the last session, which is unbelievably powerful, because if you listen to the words and the tone and the way that you just said that, everything shifted when you started reading that, and it sounded like someone who was concerned about me, who wasn't trying to talk me into doing it because they wanted something. They were trying to reach out and help me. They were trying to reach out and connect with me. They were trying to reach out and get me to take action for my own good.
Right.
And what's amazing is, he was expressing interest as a friend.
Yes.
He was saying, I've done this for you. I want to help you. I want to make a commitment to you. That's what it's all subtly saying.
Yes.
But you've got to take action if you want it.
Yes.
Very, very powerful.
That's it. Charging it neutral in a way, almost like more of a consultative approach. Is not, I'm not going to try and convince you to do this. I'm just here for you.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Number 10 is start the relationship as far upstream as you can handle. And, it's interesting because a lot of times what we realize is that whatever we ask for, whatever we're thinking about, and whatever we can put in print is what we can get. If we're looking for people who are going to sell their house right now, that's a very different approach than if we're looking for people who are going to sell their home in the next 6 to 12 months. And I'll just share with you the evolution of, how I discovered this. One of the ads that we used to run very successfully, and you can still run it very successfully, was with the headline, "Sell your house in less than 90 days, guaranteed," which is appealing to a segment of the market that has to sell their house right now. They're trying to sell it. They've been unsuccessful in selling it. That's who you're going to attract with that. But what you're not going to attract are the people who are not yet ready to sell their house, but are still in the process of getting ready to sell their house. So when we took it one step back, we started offering a free book on how to sell your house for top dollar fast, which is going to get the people who are looking to sell their house in the next 90 days, but it's also going to get people who maybe are a little bit further out, because implied in sell your house in less than 90 days is choose me to do it for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So the free book, How to Sell Your House for Top Dollar Fast, is making a little softer offer, and it's going to get
even more people who will respond to it, and maybe people who are a little further upstream. Then the next evolution of that was doing a find out how much your River Oaks home is worth for free over the phone. So it's implied you can find out what your house is worth, your sort of the built-in sort of implication there is that you're getting ready to sell your house. So there's still some immediacy to it. But the very best thing now that we've discovered, and I've been working on this now for the last 3 years, is moving the line as far out as I can. If you think about what J. Abraham talks as concentric circles, people, the biggest group of people who could potentially be our customers, the very most successful thing we've been able to do now is offering people a free September 2007 report on River Oaks house prices, which is very different than offering the find out how much your River Oaks home is worth for free over the phone, because it implies that there's some action that you're going to take right now. Whereas all the people who are going to sell their house in the next 6 to 12 months would be very interested in finding out what all of the homes in River Oaks are selling for, without implying that I want to know what my house is worth. Is that clear? Because it's subtle, but it's powerful if you can get it. So I'll amplify it if we need to.
Well, the way I think of it is that the metaphor that comes to mind for me is you hear those different accruing interest tables, compounding interest tables, where, if you invest $1 a day starting when you're born, by the time you're 70 years old, you've got more money than is in the world. Or, I'm making that up. It's whatever.
Right.
But it's amazing. But if you wait till you're 20 years old, then it's, like a tenth the money. And if you wait till you're 40 years old and, all the way on. And what most people do is wait till they're, 10 years from retirement to start saving money, rather than having started saving just $1 a day when they were born, and then they're going to be set for life. And when you start thinking more strategically and you start going more upstream, it's actually exactly what you're doing. You're compounding all of your efforts, because
that's fantastic.
Yeah, because you're spending less typically to get more leads, and then you're cultivating a relationship with those people over time, hopefully through educating and communicating with them in terms that they understand. And then you're taking the money that comes from them and you're reinvesting it in more people that are further upstream.
Yes.
It's like a compounding effect.
That's fantastic.
Dean, thank you. I really appreciate you coming and sharing in the Print Persuasion program.
No problem. Happy to do it.